Question 14, we now have a question where we need to find the period amplitude, but also the phase shift. And there is a vertical shift at this, but they're not asking for it. They only want these three things, so that's fine. But I'm going to refer you back in question 13. I went over this formula, which should be in your notes. So again, you want to add this to your mental notes so that you can put it on the blank formula sheet at the beginning of the test. It's a very important thing. So we want to find period, phase shift, amplitude. So period, so let's go ahead and write it out. And because this one, actually, we're going to have to do a little bit of work. So this is the functions defined in terms of sine, but the cosine is exactly the same thing. Because actually, you'll see a cosine is just a shifted sine function. Now, there's a little difficulty here. Two things of difficulty, but we'll deal with them. The plus 2, we could kind of forget about it because they're not asking for the vertical shift. That would be a vertical shift upwards of 2. So we'll ignore that. So I'm just going to cross it out just because we don't need it. Amplitude comes from here, the A, the number in front. So the amplitude is going to be the absolute value of the number in front, which gives us positive 3. So that's one of the things, you know, they've got the negative, but for the amplitude, it's always a positive value because it's a distance, really. Okay, so that's good. Now, before we can do the period or the phase shift, we've got to notice that the B has been sort of factored out, that we have an x minus c. We don't have x minus c, so we got this pi. We need to factor out but they both have a pi. How do we explain this? So I'm going to factor pi out of both of these, and so this becomes cosine. So we're working inside this parentheses. We take a pi out, and then it's going to put a parentheses. If I divided out a pi, that means all that's left is x. If I divided a pi out here to bring it to the front, all that's left is 1/3. Okay, now look at it. If you go back and you distribute this, you'll get pi x, which that's what we got, and pi over 3, which is what we got. So you kind of have to do that kind of double check. But you need to factor this so we have this thing. Now notice this is positive, so that means that this number, this 1/3, the phase shift, is actually going to be negative because it's always the opposite sign here. So when we had a negative, when we had a subtraction, see, the phase shift was positive, but now that we've got a negative here, the only way that could have happened is if the phase shift itself was, actually, let me put this here, kind of messed up. I'm doing too many things at once, right? So let me show you this. So what we want to think this is really become minus 3 cosine. Watch how this, to have it in terms of, it's x minus negative 1/3. Okay, so we've got it in terms of the minus. C itself is actually minus 1/3. Okay, so period though is not pi. Remember, period is 2 pi over b. B is pi, so it's 2 pi over pi. Pi's cancel, so the period is going to be 2. Put that in. The phase shift we looked at is negative 1/3. It's the value of c, but we had to factor to get it in the right setup. Okay, that's kind of the hardest part. Factoring it's hard because we're doing something backwards. But what you always want to do is, once you do factor, do a mental redistribution and see if you get back, and then you'll say, okay, yeah, because this is the forward way we're taught to do. You know, distribute is pretty straightforward, but factoring, undistributing, that's harder to do because it's in the other direction. But we can get good at it. Okay, hopefully that was helpful. That was number 14.